They expected her to break. They expected tears, fear, confusion, anything that would show weakness. But when the guards clicked the handcuffs around her wrists, the courtroom didn't see a criminal. They saw a warrior who had lived through hell and returned with the truth no one wanted to hear. Moments later, the doors swung open, and when the Admiral walked in, the entire room froze. This is her story. Welcome back to United War, where real stories of courage, sacrifice, and hidden military truths come to life. Today, we follow the extraordinary journey of a woman whose existence most people didn't even believe was possible. A female Navy SEAL sniper, a ghost in the shadows, a legend whispered about but rarely understood. Her name was Lieutenant Mara Hale. The calm before the storm. The courtroom smelled of old wood, tension, and perfume from the wealthy defense attorneys seated in polished rows. Onlookers whispered, cameras flashed, and reporters fought for angles, desperate to capture the face of the woman already being called the Rogue SEAL. But Mara didn't look at them. She stared at the floor, steady, unblinking. Not because she feared the accusations, but because she could already predict how the next 2 hours would unfold. After all, she'd survived operations where a single breath could give away her position. She'd walked miles through sand with a broken ankle, crawled under fire, swum through black oceans with blood in the water and sharks circling. A courtroom wasn't going to break her. Yet something felt wrong. Not the accusations, not the trial, not even the handcuffs. It was the silence. A silence that didn't belong. The accusation. "Lieutenant Mara Hale," the prosecutor announced, voice sharp as glass. "You stand accused of insubordination, unauthorized engagement, and endangering international operations." The crowd gasped, as if the words were bullets. But Mara remained expressionless. She knew the truth. She had saved 12 people. She had prevented a diplomatic meltdown. She had followed the only rule that mattered: never leave anyone behind. But the prosecution didn't want a hero. They wanted a scapegoat. The murmurs of doubt. The judge adjusted her glasses, studying Mara the way one examines an unmarked weapon. Dangerous, unpredictable. Behind Mara, 2 guards stood rigid. Their hands hovered near their holsters, as if the woman in cuffs were somehow more dangerous than all the criminals they'd ever escorted. People whispered, "Is she really a SEAL? Women can't pass that training. I heard she was part of a classified unit. They say she disobeyed a direct order. No, she saved her team." And then the cruelest whisper of all. She should have just stayed in line. Mara heard every voice, ignored every one. She wasn't here for them. The memory of what led her here. As the prosecutor paced dramatically, Mara's mind drifted, back to the sandstorm, back to the radio silence, back to the moment when she realized her entire team was walking into a trap. The order from command was clear. Hold position. Do not engage. Wait for backup. But Mara knew backup would arrive too late. She could hear the enemy repositioning. She could feel the tension in the wind. She could sense danger the same way all elite snipers did, through instinct honed by years of brutal training. So she made a choice: save them or follow the rules and watch them die. She chose to save them, and that's why she was here. The court awaits a verdict, but Mara waits for someone else. The prosecutor slammed a stack of papers on the desk. "This woman," he declared, "acted recklessly." Before he could finish, Mara lifted her head for the first time. Her eyes were calm, too calm. The prosecutor froze mid-sentence, not because of fear, but because there was something unexplainable in her gaze, a soldier who had already accepted whatever fate awaited her. But Mara wasn't listening to him anymore. She was listening for footsteps, a very specific pair of footsteps, boot steps, measured, heavy, authoritative, the kind worn only by someone who had walked through fire and commanded fire. The Admiral arrived. Then it happened. The back doors of the courtroom burst open, not violently, but with the kind of force that comes from absolute authority. Every soldier in the room instinctively straightened. Every whisper stopped mid-breath, and Mara looked up, finally. An admiral walked in, white uniform, rows of ribbons heavy on his chest, a face carved by decades of storms, wars, and impossible decisions. No one had expected him to come, not to this, not for her. The prosecutor's confidence evaporated. The judge stumbled to her feet. The guards swallowed hard, because this wasn't just any admiral. This was the man who commanded the very units Mara had served in, the man who knew every classified detail of the mission she'd been forced to stay silent about, the man whose word could overturn everything. Everyone waited for him to speak, but he didn't. He walked right past the prosecutor, past the lawyers, past the guards. He stopped in front of Mara Hale, looked her in the eyes, took a breath, and then he saluted her. The courtroom erupted. The courtroom didn't just erupt, it fractured. Reporters bolted to their feet. Defense attorneys froze mid-breath. Even the guards, hands still hovering near their holsters, stared in disbelief. An admiral saluting a handcuffed defendant? It didn't happen. It couldn't happen. Not unless something was very, very wrong with the entire story they'd been told. But Mara Hale didn't blink. She returned the salute as much as the handcuffs allowed, the chains rattling softly like distant wind chimes in a battlefield ruin. To her, the Admiral's gesture wasn't honor, it was confirmation. He knew. He knew everything. Whispers turned to shock. The judge slammed her gavel. Order! Order! But nothing could silence the whispers now. Why is an admiral saluting her? She must have saved someone important. What if the charges are false? Is this about that classified mission in the Gulf? No, this is bigger. Look at his uniform. Every rumor, every doubt, every accusation, it all began to unravel before their eyes. The prosecutor tried to recover, straightening his tie. Admiral Rourke, your presence here is unexpected. This is a criminal proceeding. The admiral slowly turned his head. One look. Just one. The prosecutor's voice withered like a candle in a storm. The man behind the myth. Admiral Jonathan Rourke, a man whose reputation carried more weight than medals. He had commanded covert SEAL teams across 3 continents. He had shaped strategies that never made it into history books. And he was known for one thing above all. He never saluted unless it was earned. He approached the bench with a disciplined calm that made the entire courtroom feel smaller. Your Honor, he said, voice deep and controlled. Lieutenant Hale is not the criminal she is being painted as. She is the reason 12 American families did not receive folded flags last month. A gasp rippled through the courtroom. Mara didn't move. She didn't need to. The truth was finally emerging from a mouth powerful enough to make it matter. The judge struggled for control. Admiral, the judge said carefully, this is an ongoing trial. You cannot simply walk in and... I can, and I will. The judge stiffened. The courtroom's energy shifted in an instant. A moment ago, the atmosphere had been stacked against Mara. Accusing eyes, sinister whispers, a prosecutor ready to tear her career apart. Now, for the first time, the balance tilted. The classified operation. Rourke turned to face the spectators, his voice steady enough to cut through every doubt. Her orders were outdated by the time she received them. Communications were jammed. Our intelligence was compromised. The enemy was waiting to ambush our men. He continued. Hale recognized it. She made a battlefield decision, and she executed it with precision. Because of Lieutenant Hale, 12 operators walked out alive. A heavy silence filled the room. This wasn't just a defense. This was a revelation. But Mara knew what was coming next. The part he couldn't reveal. The true mission. The real stakes. The reason she was being targeted by people far above the courtroom's jurisdiction. She closed her eyes for a moment, steadying her breath. The prosecutor's last stand. The prosecutor found a sliver of courage. With all due respect, Admiral, operational context does not excuse disobeying direct orders. She endangered diplomatic relations. She interfered with intelligence procedures. Rourke cut him off again. Incorrect. He took a step forward. The diplomatic risk came from our own command failures. Hale prevented a massacre. And if she hadn't acted when she did, we would be facing an international incident far worse than anything you've imagined. The prosecutor swallowed. He was losing control, fast. But he still had one move left. Admiral, if this mission was truly classified, then why wasn't I briefed? Rourke's answer was a dagger. Because you don't have the clearance. Gasps. Shock. Disbelief. This trial wasn't just flawed. It was built on lies. Mara's silent strength. Mara lifted her head again. Not in defiance, not in anger, but in calm acceptance. For the first time since the trial began, she was no longer alone. Her teammates had been barred from testifying. Her reports had been redacted. Her voice had been silenced. But an Admiral's voice, that couldn't be hidden. The Admiral's warning. Rourke took another step toward the bench. Your Honor, if you intend to continue this trial, I will require a closed session, a secure room, and clearance for everyone present. A heavy tension filled the air. Everyone realized what that meant. They weren't dealing with a reckless sniper. They were dealing with someone who had been part of something bigger, something hidden, something dangerous. The judge swallowed hard. Admiral, what exactly are you implying? Rourke looked directly at her. That this trial should never have existed. For the first time, the judge hesitated. She glanced at Mara, then at the prosecutor, then at the handcuffs, shining under the courtroom lights like a symbol of injustice. Lieutenant Hale, she finally said, I need to ask you a direct question. Mara nodded slowly. Yes, Your Honor. Did you knowingly violate a command? Mara breathed in deeply and answered, Yes. The courtroom exploded again, but Mara wasn't finished. She lifted her head, voice steady. Because obeying that order would have killed every man on my team. The courtroom's noise crashed like a tidal wave. Gasps, murmurs, shock, disbelief. A SEAL openly admitting she disobeyed orders, and an Admiral defending her for it. Nothing about this trial was normal anymore. The judge's gavel hammered the desk. Order! Order now! Gradually, the room calmed, but not completely. People leaned forward in their seats, unable to look away from Mara Hale as if she'd morphed from an accused criminal into a puzzle that suddenly mattered. The judge turned to her with sharp curiosity. Lieutenant Hale, you said obeying the order would have killed your team. Explain. Mara inhaled slowly. This was the moment she had avoided for weeks. The moment she had been warned not to reach. But she also knew, if she didn't speak now, the truth would be buried forever. The real story begins. Mara's voice remained calm. The mission brief said the compound was abandoned, that the targets had fled, that the area was cold and safe for quick extraction. She lifted her handcuffed wrists slightly, the chains rattling. But when we were en route, I intercepted something. The prosecutor immediately jumped up. "Your Honor, she is referring to classified intelligence." "Sit down," the judge snapped. He sat. Mara continued. "A faint transmission, a frequency that shouldn't have been active, one used only by Emir Division." A silent quake passed through Admiral Rourke's expression. Not fear, recognition. The judge leaned forward. "Emir Division? I've never heard of it." "You're not supposed to," the Admiral murmured. "The secret signal." Mara nodded. "It's a ghost unit. Blackout operations. No paper trail, no uniforms, no official existence." "And you intercepted their signal?" the judge asked. Mara nodded once. "By accident." That word hung in the air. "Accident?" the prosecutor scoffed. "How does someone accidentally intercept the transmission from an elite covert division?" Mara turned to him. "Because I built the device that caught it." Silence. Dead, absolute silence. The prosecutor sat back down as if gravity doubled. "The trap." Mara continued, voice steady but dark. "The signal wasn't meant for us. It was a distress call. Emir operatives were pinned, outnumbered, and surrounded." The judge frowned. "Then why did your team receive outdated orders to enter the area?" Mara and the Admiral answered at the same time. "Because it was a kill zone." The judge froze. What? A kill zone?" Rourke stepped forward. "Our intelligence had been hacked. The enemy had gained access to command channels. They fed false information directly into our system, and someone on the inside let it pass through." A wave of cold realization spread through the courtroom. This wasn't about a disobedient sniper. This was about infiltration, espionage, treason. The impossible shot. Mara's gaze grew distant, remembering. "When we arrived, everything was wrong. There were no friendly markers, no thermal signatures matching the report, no movement except—" She paused. "Except the shadows on the rooftops." She lifted her eyes. 24 of them. The courtroom went still. She said, "Snipers. All aimed at my team." Someone in the back whispered, "My God." The judge steadied herself. "What did you do?" Mary answered bluntly, "I took the shot." The judge blinked. "Just one?" Mary nodded. "One. One bullet, one chance to warn Emir Division and alert my team without alerting the ambushers." She paused. "And I hit the radio antenna at exactly the frequency jammer's blind spot." The Admiral cleared his throat softly, a rare tell that he was holding back emotion. "That shot," he said, "saved 22 lives. The price of truth." The prosecutor tried one last angle. "Even if this is true, and I'm not saying it is, you still disobeyed direct orders." Mara's eyes hardened. "Orders based on corrupted intelligence." "That's irrelevant," he snapped. But the Admiral cut in sharply. "It is everything." The Admiral walked to the front of the courtroom, turning to face the crowd. "You all want the truth? Fine. Here it is." He pointed at Mara. "She didn't just save Emir Division. She uncovered the breach in our system." The room inhaled as one. "She identified a traitor." Gasps exploded again. The judge stared at Mara. "You identified a traitor?" Mara nodded slowly, but her eyes flicked toward the prosecutor, not as an accusation, as a warning. The night everything fell apart. Mara spoke quietly now. "The moment I reported the breach, everything changed." Her voice carried a weight heavier than any accusation. "My access was revoked. My reports were deleted. My clearance was frozen. And suddenly, I was under investigation." The prosecutor slammed his hand on the table. That is circumstantial. Rourke turned and faced him. No, it's deliberate. The Admiral placed a file on the evidence table. A thick one. A dangerous one. What's that? The judge asked. Rourke answered. This is everything my team uncovered about the man who tried to bury her. And he's not done yet. But at that moment, something happened no one expected. Someone stood near the back of the courtroom. A man in a dark suit. Expression unreadable. Eyes cold. He didn't clap. He didn't react. He didn't speak. He simply walked toward the exit. Slowly. Calmly. And disappeared behind the double doors without a sound. Maris saw him. And she knew. The real enemy had just revealed himself. The courtroom had gone still. Unnaturally still. Because Mara wasn't the only one who noticed the man in the black suit leaving the chamber. Admiral Rourke noticed too. His jaw clenched. Just once. That tiny movement meant danger. Danger Mara knew all too well. The judge hadn't even seen the man's face. Neither had most of the courtroom. But Mara had. And she recognized him instantly. The man with no name. He wasn't supposed to exist. He wasn't on any roster. No badge. No insignia. A ghost. The kind of operative who didn't leave footprints, files, or friends. A handler. Or worse. A cleaner. And if a cleaner was present, it meant someone wanted this trial to end before the truth fully surfaced. Mara's heart pounded against her ribs, not in fear, but in calculation. Because now she understood. The trial wasn't about her disobedience. It wasn't about the mission. It wasn't even about the breach. It was about eliminating the one person who could expose everything. Her. The Admiral makes his move. The judge looked at the Admiral. Admiral Rourke, is something wrong? He didn't answer her. His eyes remained fixed on the courtroom doors. Finally, he spoke. Your Honor, I request immediate adjournment and transfer to a secured facility. The prosecutor jumped up. On what grounds? Rourke turned sharply. On the grounds that the person responsible for this entire breach was just in this courtroom. Gasps erupted. Mara felt the temperature drop. The judge gripped her gavel with white knuckles. Admiral, explain yourself. Not here, he said. Not in a public room filled with possible leaks. The prosecutor protested. This is absurd. You can't just halt. Rourke snapped. Sit down, son. This is bigger than your career. And the room fell silent. Mara's decision. Mara rose slowly from her seat. Her chains clinked softly, but she stood tall, shoulders back, head high. Your Honor, she said calmly. He's right. This room isn't safe. The judge stared at her, not with suspicion anymore, but with unease. You believe your life is in danger? Mara spoke plainly. It's not my life they want to end. It's my testimony. The judge swallowed. This was no longer a military hearing. It was becoming a national emergency. The security breach. Suddenly, the lights flickered. Just once. Barely noticeable. But Mara noticed. And so did Rourke. The Admiral immediately moved toward her. Everyone stay exactly where you are, he barked. The guards reached for their weapons. Reporters ducked instinctively. Lawyers froze mid-gesture. The lights flickered again. The judge whispered, What's happening? Mara answered first. They're cutting surveillance. Rourke added. And clearing digital records. The prosecutor paled. You mean... Yes, Mara said. They're erasing everything. connected to this trial. The doors burst open. 3 military police officers rushed inside, but Mara instantly knew something was wrong. Their gear wasn't standard issue. Their boots didn't match base protocol. Their formation was too precise for MPs, but too loose for SEALs. Imposters, Mara whispered. Rourke, they're not ours. He didn't hesitate. Lieutenant Hale, on me. Even in cuffs, even surrounded, Mara moved with soldierly instinct. The imposters raised their rifles. Hands where we can see them, the lead shouted. Rourke stepped in front of Mara like a steel wall. Put those weapons down, the Admiral commanded. They didn't. That was all the proof he needed. The clash. The room erupted. Reporters screamed. Lawyers dove under desks. The judge shielded herself behind the stand. One imposter swung his rifle, but Mara moved faster. His hand snapped forward, grabbing the barrel, twisting, and slamming the man into the bench with brutal precision. Another aimed at Mara. She ducked, pivoted, and despite the cuffs, swept her leg, knocking the attacker off balance. A third tried to flank them. But 2 real MPs stormed in behind him, tackling him to the ground. In seconds, the chaos subsided. The imposters were pinned, disarmed, exposed. Mara stood in the center of the courtroom, breathing hard, but unshaken. Her cuffs glinted under the buzzing fluorescent lights, but now they looked less like restraints and more like symbols of everything she had endured. The truth finally revealed. The judge rose, trembling but resolute. Admiral, tell me everything. No more secrecy, no more redactions. Rourke nodded. The man who just left this courtroom is part of a rogue intelligence cell embedded within our infrastructure. He continued. They intentionally fed false data into our systems. They set the kill zone. They planned to sacrifice Hale's entire team to conceal their operations overseas. A horrified gasp rippled through the room. Rourke's jaw tightened. And when Hale survived, they tried to silence her. The judge looked at Mara. Lieutenant, is this true? Mara nodded. They've been following me for weeks. Every attempt to speak up has been blocked. Rourke put a hand on her shoulder, a gesture rarely seen from a man like him. She didn't disobey a command, he said. She disobeyed a death sentence. The verdict that shook the room. The judge lifted her chin, eyes blazing with new clarity. In light of the evidence, I hereby dismiss all charges against Lieutenant Mara Hale. Mara closed her eyes, exhaling a breath she'd held for months. But the judge wasn't finished. I also order immediate federal investigation into all parties involved in this breach. A murmur surged, fearful, shocked, admiring. Mara opened her eyes. For the first time since the mission, she held something she hadn't felt since the mission. Relief. The final moment. The Admiral approached the bench. Your Honor, he said, I also request permission to remove Lieutenant Hale's restraints. Granted. He unlocked the cuffs himself. The metal fell away. Mara rubbed her wrists, then looked at the Admiral. Sir, she whispered. But he shook his head. No, Lieutenant. After what you've done. He took one step back and snapped into a perfect salute. It's me who salutes you. The entire courtroom watched in stunned silence. This time, she returned the salute fully, standing tall, unbound, and unbroken. And for the first time since the mission, Mara Hale was free.